that and control against that. But I would say that the challenge that comes, as folks will know, maintaining a good safety culture is a continuous effort and hard work. And when you have changes to your organization like goes on during these periods of time, though, maintaining that culture and managing the change of personnel in your leadership structure and up and down the organization, that's what we find is the really difficult part of managing through one of these cycles. And in fact, it's difficult all the time to maintain the focus and to continue to keep safety at the forefront. Thank you.
So I know one of your great passions is innovation and always looking to do something different. Has there been any key essential examples that you can give that have come to the forefront with that around innovation in business?
Well, it's extensive, as everybody knows. And I might just, before I dive into examples, actually talk a little bit about how I think innovation affects the safety scene.
Yep.
And one of the things that everybody will know this, I mean, when things get difficult, when you're having trouble getting something to work, say you're at home doing a Saturday afternoon project and things aren't going well, you're likely to start departing from plan, getting a bit frustrated, pushing a bit, and that's often when you hurt yourself or somebody gets hurt. Over, I'd say, the recent years, we've become much more sensitive to the fact that making people's work easier, making people's work smoother and less effort is one of the single most important things we can do for safety, in addition to engaging them around, all of us around our ownership of safety. That seems like a no-brainer because we've always known that people do get hurt when things aren't going well. That's a very correlation. But we really hadn't focused on systematically how do you get out ahead. We tend to do it again in the rearview mirror. Somebody's gotten hurt, we do an investigation. Yeah, then we figure out why that was going wrong, and then you sort of solve it after the fact. So, just like the rest of my business, innovation makes things easier. So if people can spend less time doing whatever it might be, maybe it's journey management your area, maybe it takes less time to do that, maybe it's less driving to get to places, what have you. If we can remove all of those hurdles people have to go over, then the essential part of the work gets easier and safer, and at obviously lower cost. So they all go together.
I certainly, last month I heard Shane Webke talk about Safe Together, or say Work October Safe Month, and talked about the horrific story about his father not coming home from work and receiving that dreadful call at 3 o'clock in the morning with his parents, and the impact that had ongoing with not only his immediate family, but his own family. Talks about now about the importance and criticality of safety every day. It's there, isn't it? You can't get away from it.
No, you can't. And we all live and work in organizations and basically friends and family. And if you've been impacted by one of those events, it stays with you forever. But it's also not very hard to mention that. So if you've been fortunate and haven't, you can certainly envision that. And so it is first and foremost in everything that we do. For that reason. But I would wrap that back around. Innovation is making everything we do easier, and that's a key going forward.
As a company trying to be innovative, we're very happy to hear that, Paige. So, are there some examples that you can share with us about what has made that easy? What are the innovations that you believe have changed the way we do things today?
Well, there's a number of the things we do. Like I say, the journey management is an easy example. Comes to mind straight away because we're sitting here. But it's everything. For one, I'd say our industry is a little bit slower than a lot of other industries, not for lack of will, but because of the intensive engineering aspect and the amount of equipment and get as opposed to just process. But we're getting there, and so you see advances in drone research. We see advances, some of the neat stuff we see are better software tools for managing and executing projects or even work. And so, the better planned your work, the less likely it is you're going to realize halfway through that you don't have something you need, a tool or a piece, which then puts time pressure on the team and leads to mistakes. So we're out of that. Yeah.
How important, and I know one of your favourite high touch but very simplistic things you've shared with me in the past is your deck of cards about creating a safety conversation. But maybe even just talking about the conversation about how we approach that is important as well.
Yeah, that's actually a good point, Joe. So we use a lot of tools to foster engagement, and the key point I would make is when it comes to safety, we're never going to innovate away that direct interaction, because safety is about humans and our behavior and what we do, and whether it's process safety, making sure that things stay in the pipe, that's still dependent upon how our human organization manages that process and the decisions they make. So safety engagement is paramount. But a good example of how technology may help that, we're both part of step change, not step change, Safer Together here in Queensland, and there's a lot of efforts underway. And one of the things we developed is a safety cultural survey through that joint effort that can be taken on anybody's personal device. So it's open platform, and you go out into the field. But instead of sending a safety survey off to your organization and then having it go away and be interpreted and graphed and analyzed and comes back 60 days later and management looks at it, and then by the time they go back out, everybody forgot they took it, what have you. It does it live. So you can go out to the field, I can go out to the field with a group of people. They can sit down in 10, 15 minutes, run through these questions, and the results come up live, and then you can actually have the conversation right there. And then built into it is a bit more open-ended. What one thing would you change? Why would you say that's so important? And so you can engage with the folks right there while you're doing it and develop improvement and action plans while it's fresh in everybody's mind. And that's really valuable, because when you get that direct engagement, they can see an outcome, and they actually see a willingness to do something, whereas in the old way of doing it, it would be hard to actually connect the two events of what may happen.
And you're doing what we say before, you're chasing your tail about looking in the rear vision mirror about what happened back there rather than the pitch.
But there is no substitute for getting out there and walking and talking and being with folks routinely.
So we've gone around some of the changes we've identified. If you could look into the crystal ball and see what the next big changes are that are coming, or what we need to do, where are the things that probably keep you awake most at night, if that's a fair question, and what do you think is the most important things that we really need to put energy into?
Well, from a safety standpoint, I mean, I just worry about where our systems break down. Thankfully, we all do much, much better than we used to 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago. But unfortunately, there are still accidents out there that you hear about, what have you. And so I do worry all the time about when's that day if we miss something. But the most important innovation we're doing is we have some things called learning teams. And a guy named Todd Conklin, who does work out there in the industry, and he has a book that he calls Pre-Accident Investigation, but it's really about trying to go to what I talked about earlier, which is not waiting for the accident to go investigate, but actually have teams who go out and engage with different parts of the work group and say, what's difficult for you? If we're getting ready to come in and do a routine 4-monthly maintenance deal, what do you know is going to be a pain in the backside? And what will you think about? And actually go out and try to work with the guys on the ground, the guys and ladies on the ground, and redesign the process up front. so that it's easier for them to execute and more robust. So I think that's something that hopefully will spread. We're still learning how to do that better, so it's on a fairly steep learning curve. But that happens. Conoco does it elsewhere in the world, but APLNG is doing it here as well with our operations, and they exchange best practices about how you do that. Because you can imagine that's a conversation that doesn't just happen naturally. But again, once people start to get the hang of it and see the value of it, then people find enthusiastic, because everybody would like to make their job a little bit more hassle-free if they can help it.
Do you see much of that sharing happening? I imagine like the complexity of a business like the one that you're involved in has many contractors, has many subcontractors, has many people on the ground. Yeah. How regularly do you think those things are sharing, or is that something that should be done more of? Is there collaboration happening?
It varies around the world, and it's changing, thankfully, quite a bit. There's a lot more openness to sharing than there used to be. There used to be a lot of folks who felt like they had competitive advantages of this or that and couldn't possibly share totally what they do. Most of that's gone away, which is good, particularly in the arena when it comes to safety. And so, again, Safer Together, the initiative here, we've been going almost 4 years now, and early on there were all those concerns raised, because it's basically everybody that has anything to do with industry, contractors, service companies, the operating companies, and that's bearing a lot of benefit as we go forward. And people, they visit each other's locations, so that, they'll be hosted and go on to other people's locations, talk to their staffs, teams, and that works two ways. People get ideas to take back home to their organizations, and they also often leave behind suggestions and things that could work there. So, and as that's been going on, people are getting more and more comfortable, and we've seen significant improvement in safety, reduction in injury rates, this is mostly at the moment focused on behavioral safety, because if we went back 5 years here in Queensland, we actually were probably in the 4th quartile of global safety performance. So there was room for improvement. We're now down probably solidly into the 2nd quartile from that standpoint.
I remember you sharing when you were in Townsville last year a graph that showed lost time injuries and how important it was to go ahead of it, also about taking responsibility. Right. There's an alarming difference in plan or not plan. And I think we've seen a similar thing with a client lately, that basically a very clear sign or directive that says, if you've taken a safety concern to your manager and you don't think it's got heard or acted on or listened to, you take it to the next level.
Yeah.
That's obviously a very un-Australian way to do it sometimes, in hierarchy and protocol.
Yeah. Well, it's really something to encourage. ConocoPhillips, my parent company, has had a slogan for all 25 plus years I've been there, which is nothing so important that we can't, or so urgent and important that we can't do it safely. And of course, different folks have doubt about that, but over time, that starts to become accepted. So then people do kind of lift it up. But I would say it's more important that leadership delve down in and find that, by talking to people rather than relying upon them to come up and talk about it. Yeah. Because you can get a feel for it if you're spending enough time out there. When I joined Conoco originally, it was part of DuPont, and so very much part of the DuPont safety culture. And they've got a lot of tools. People will know about that, but the core of what they do is a requirement that their leadership at all levels spends time on the work front every day. And you go out by yourself. It's not going out with a delegation if you visit a job site. One of the things I've learned over the years is don't go around with the job site management in a group of 20 and try to talk to people. Go by yourself or with an escort if you're not familiar with the site, and just talk to folks, and you'll pretty quickly get a feel for how things are on that side. One thing I will say here in Australia, just like most of the world, people are not shy about telling you once you're there and asking, and that type of thing.
And it'd be interesting, a different question, I guess. Culturally speaking, in Australia, do you still Or do you believe that we still have that should be right attitude, or is that changing?
Well, it's certainly changing up here with what we've been doing with Safer Together. We've seen that and a more willingness to engage about how do we make sure it's right. So when I go out on the ground, I get a lot less of that response.
All right. I think we've got some opportunity for some questions. So if there's anybody out there that wants to ask Paige a question, a great opportunity to do so. It may take a few moments to do so. Certainly, one of the questions I'll ask while we're waiting for some of those questions to come through is about leadership, and we all know that in safety, very well used terms that everybody's responsible for safety. In an organisation as big as safety, how do you see that flowing through? Is it a delegation or by department?
So I think it's by example. It's a very common thing to say everybody's responsible. The day you actually up or watch out over here, we've got this activity going on today, that's when you realize that they're starting ownership for their site, what they do. And that's a key thing. But one thing I've always believed, safety is owned by the line workforce. And so that's all the way from the CEO down through the line. It's not owned by the HSE department. They are your professional coaches, facilitators, enablers, but they're not the ones who are responsible or accountable. It's everybody from the person on the wrench to the top that's in that line doing work.
When you mentioned before about typically the uptake within the resources sector hasn't been as is that when an issue is put forward, is there an expectation or are there KPIs in regards to if something is critical or defined criticality that it gets dealt with pretty quickly?
Oh, I think there's an openness. It's just that when I say compared to other industries, I'm thinking of the high-tech industries and all the service industry and all the ways that they've just completely redefined what they do. We're still a little bit limited by just like I say, the amount of pipe and steel and machines that we have to deal with that sort of can't just be removed from the process. But we certainly all of the other things around it. Thank you.
Very good. Any questions coming through?
I saw one.
I saw one come through.
There it is.
From within your organisation, how do you ensure that you're receiving the best competent safety advice? Obviously, is it one or two people? Is it a committee? I know Safe Together now is another program.
So I mentioned earlier, the HSE department doesn't, they're not the owners of safety, but they are the enablers. So a couple of things. We always try to be sure that our HSE professionals aren't just trained in that side of the world, but they've actually in their background had line responsibility, team leader, field engineer, supervisor, so that they're grounded in that. So that's part of it. But I would say the main thing is that we seek validation all the time. So like I say, my preferred way is to go out and walk the ground and hear it direct, but also just don't accept, question the things you're getting, not in a negative way, but don't just take it at face value.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Question here from Andrew. What are your thoughts on just culture and a blameless safety environment?
So that's a dialogue that's been going on for at least 2 decades that I'm aware of. But so look, I think it's often too black and white of a dialogue. So I referred to step change earlier. I was in the UK during the early days of step change, and 5 years there, part of that journey. And there was a big time where they swung through in the North Sea that blameless culture was really important. Everybody wants to be safe. And then they went to adjust culture because it sort of opened up other problems, lack of accountability at whatever level. I tend to think of, like anything, fairness. It should be fair. So there's not a blank check. So if somebody willingly violates a procedure that they know about or repeatedly fails, then there's a appropriate consequence. On the other hand, if somebody's doing their best to do the best they can, following all work procedures, etc., which is probably the most often the case, actually, when we see something happen, then they shouldn't bear any consequence. But it is, treat them the way you'd want to be treated if you were in that circumstance, and recognize. I don't know about you guys, but I can certainly have a brain dead moment and screw up or what have you as well. So
we'd like to think that a large percentage of people don't wake up every morning to say, what am I going to stuff up today? Inherently there, we've got people to be working safely and thinking safely and giving them the tools and the resources and culture they can. So it's a great question, Andrew. Just reading the screen again. So from Renee. Do you see, what are some of the tools that have come together from Safe Together Utilities?
Oh, gosh, there's quite a few.
Yeah, you mentioned the card system, the survey.
Yeah, there's several enablers for engagement. So we've got the cards. The survey's just getting rolled out. We've just completed the tool. We've got a Jenga tower, which helps, again.
A Jenga tower?
Yeah.
Like a Jenga tower?
Yeah. So, the old wooden tower where they pull bits out and you construct where that pulling controls out and how long till it auto crashes down or whatever, and then engagement to full. But they a mobile laboratory that they take around which demonstrates the explosives and what the power of an explosive event is, which just helps build awareness around process safety and asset integrity. They've got standards around land transport, so any trucking, any driving, they've aligned around that. And actually, there's a whole host of tools. So actually, you can go to the Safer Together website, and that opens up the door into the range of things that are.
It is a tool to see some of the, I guess, returns on that investment or returns on the idea. And that's all about return on investment.
So we've definitely seen an improvement in the industry level. We get lots of stories back from, because a lot of our contractors in the construction side work in all industries. We've gotten a lot of stories back about people rolling off of our big construction phase and going back to other areas and actually standing up and saying, why are we doing stuff this way? It could be done much better, much safer. So affecting the wider safety atmosphere in around Queensland and parts of Australia from that regard. So it's already bearing fruit, and it's something that, a step change they've been doing for 17, 18 years in the UK, and we're farther down the road, but we're well on our way.
A question from Ken. Do you see a link between more general project failure, i.e. cost or time, and a failure in safety performance?
Yes, we do. For as long as I can remember, people have always said, look, they go together. They're not mutually exclusive. If you get good at safety, you'll get better at cost and execution, and vice versa. And we still subscribe to that. But I think the thing that I was talking about of sitting down and actually proactively saying, how do I make sure the work execution goes smoother, with less, it's easier to do things, what have you, sort of proactively gets ahead of that learning curve for both cost and safety. And so we've learned here, same old lesson, that if you have to go back, if you have to recycle, if you repeat, or if you have to delay, that's where your costs get away from you. It's not in the upfront work, and even a bit of scope change won't blow it away from you near as much as that repeat or recycle.
Yeah, I guess it's always the same thing as the time taken to plan at the start and do things right. Carpenters have got away with the cut once, measure twice, or measure twice, cut once for many years. Well,
and we found a lot of that is just making sure folks at the work front are involved in that planning, because planners tend to go do it in the backdrop, and so make it so there's a cycle where they go out and actually say, how would you do this on this spot on the ground, and then make sure that you ask folks, for their ideas, and we've seen some really good things happen where on Curtis Island, where Bechtel was building all those plants, where they actually went out and asked folks what would make it easier to do this, and so, for example, the concrete guys said, well, actually, we custom make, the carpenters make up all these forms and stuff, but here, there's a system out there. If you go get this, it's a modular form, reusable thing you can do. And management said, sure, and it actually cut the amount of time and effort they had to do that significantly. And again, the exposure, because every time you're building it by hand, you're cutting, you're nailing, everything else.
Which I think we quite often hear stories of systems that have been created without the involvement of the key stakeholders, being people that's having to perform that.
Exactly.
Frustrated, and it's often, unfortunately, where workarounds happen and the safety has a dramatic effect.
Exactly right.
Another question from Ron. Thanks, Ron. Does Safety Together involve the other major LNG operators, such as Santos, JESI, Shell, and how often do they meet?
So, yes, it does. So, the genesis of it was back in about 2011. We started talking about setting up Safer Together, and a bit along modeled after Step Change in the UK. And a key part of that was all of us were part of it, so all the 4 companies, including Arrow, that were considering LNG here. But we invited in all of the contractor industries. So there's 4 of us, but I think Safer Together has 70-some members now from that standpoint. So that's a crucial aspect. And one of the key changes was all of us working together. So there are meetings. The steering body, the leadership body, meets 4 times a year, plus ad hoc. We have 2 whole half-day seminars a year, so the next one's December 6th. And then work groups, there's a series of work groups, like I'm on the safety leadership work group that's actually talking about how to foster leadership, and we meet monthly as a group of folks. And we have annual budgets, work programs that get reported back to that steering group or board, if you will.
When you say you're in the leadership, I take it there's other committees that form out of that group as well?
Well, so no, that group works purely on how to foster safety leadership at all levels. So it's actually about leadership per se. There is a leadership group which governs Safer Together's activities. That's a different thing. And then, there are work groups on asset integrity, the land transport, drilling, a whole number of them.
Very good. All right. I think we've used up our half hour very well. I think certainly some great insights there, and it's always a pleasure to catch up with you, Paige, and talk about not only safety but leadership and where you see things happening. And certainly I value the time we get to grab from you occasionally, and I'm glad to be able to share it with some of the people out there in the industry as well. So certainly thanks for your time.
Well, thank you, Joe.
Thank you, everybody, for coming in.
Yeah, thank you, and I hope it was of use to some folks.
Very good. Thanks. The details of the webinar will be available online, so stay tuned. We'll get those out to you very quickly. Any questions that you may not have got answered, I'm sure if you send them through, we'll be happy to pass them on to Paige as well. Thanks all for joining us. Thank you.